at Rockefeller Center during my first Christmas in New York City. When I was serving there was a scene acted out from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. In it, the Cratchit family receives the wonderful gift of a prize turkey. And as the family wonders aloud who could have possibly sent such a gift, Tiny Tim declares that he believes the giver to be Mr. Scrooge, his father's boss. Doubtful due to all she knows about her husband's boss, that Scrooge would send their family any gift, let alone one as wonderful as the turkey, Tiny Tim's mother inquires of him, why would Mr. Scrooge lose his sense and do something like this? Her son responds with one word, Christmas. Sisters and brothers, while this wonderful scene was beautifully painted, the original intent of Dickens' feelings on Christmas is honored in the play that I saw. Dickens believed that Christmas was a unique time, that it was affected on the human race, and that it would become infectious to all. With each chapter of A Christmas Carol that was published, he unfolded a spirit of Christmas in which people let go of their petty disputes, selfish tendencies, and work ethic schedules, and they would choose instead of friendship and charity and celebration. Even in the most cheerless of situations, the most impoverished, Dickens portrays people at Christmas as good-natured, as being pleasant, pleased with one another, more eager to forgive and to restore broken relationships, at peace with their situations. In A Christmas Carol, he writes, every person had a kinder word for one another on that day than any other day of the year. Laughter and joy filled the streets as people went about their daily tasks. Dickens believed that all persons at this time of year would experience the most wonderful time of the year. For him, sisters and brothers, it was this way in part because it had a butterfly effect. He believed that one small change in one person somewhere, caused by the spirit of Christmas, led to a larger change in more people, which touched off an even larger change in even more people. This idea of the butterfly effect, sisters and brothers, was developed by a meteorologist who had been working on models about how tropical storms, typhoons, and hurricanes were developed. He believed that the small whirlpool of wind current made by a butterfly wing can change the weather on the other side of the globe. If one butterfly fluttering by can add to a hurricane, more butterflies fluttering by can change the course of that hurricane entirely. Church, the idea behind the butterfly effect is that we inhabit a universe in which everything is part of everything else. We are all connected. Kind of sounds like us Methodists, huh? So Dickens' ideas that one small change in one person somewhere caused by the spirit of Christmas led to a larger change in more people, which touched off an even larger change in even more people, and so on. In other words, he believed that the loving kindness of people who have caught the Christmas spirit was so contagious that it would change individuals, it would change households, it would change communities, and potentially it would change the world that we live in. Church, from its beginning, Christmas has produced a butterfly effect, containing within its sacred story elements of characters which have the ability to connect each and every part of the universe. See, church, for the Christmas story is that God comes to be with us in a manger in Bethlehem. God comes to us to challenge us, to search our souls, to comfort us, to redeem us, to restore us, to empower us, and to give us peace, to fill us with wonder and love, praise and joy, and to make us one again. It is any wonder that Christmas is called the most wonderful time of the year. It is hard to imagine when we consider that Christmas has its roots in the historic time when Herod, the king of the Jews, was the ruler, in love with power and buildings. He decided to build the temple bigger and better in order to gain favor with the religious Jews. He wanted to keep them happy. He went out of his way to make certain that they knew he would not interfere with their activities of daily life at the temple. Within the temple, there were specific portions that only a certain group of men could enter. These were called the lay priests, who would, and they were the descendants of Moses' brother Aaron. Their job twice a year was to take off from work, to serve at the temple from Sabbath to Sabbath. They went because they saw this as part of their divine calling, a fulfilling of God's desires for them. Their duties included being in charge of the sacrifices and offerings at the altar, to lead in worship, to teach people the law of God, and to help them determine God's will. The icing on the cake for these lay priests was to be chosen to burn incense in the holy place of the temple. It is something, sisters and brothers, that priests would only in a lifetime get to do. Some priests never ever got to do it at all. Church, as the Christmas story begins, a man named Zechariah was chosen by Lot to perform the ceremony of burning incense before the Lord. His task was to scatter the incense on the hot coals that had been prepared there. Zechariah was elated to be the one chosen. He was honored. He entered the holy place of the temple dancing on air, something I probably would do. He began to say, wait until I tell my wife Elizabeth. How many husbands say that? Well, you have good news. Yeah, no one. That's what I thought when I was writing this. She would be so pleased to find out what had just taken place and all of the details that involved. Even though he felt as if this was the most wonderful time of his life, as usual, when he thought of his wife, there was some sadness that began to take place because they had been married for more than half a century and had remained childless. All the prayers in the world had not changed their situation. Why had God not responded to the numerous petitions? Zechariah wasn't certain about this. Even though God seemed to remain silent on this matter, the couple continued to pray. As they grew older, they stopped praying for a child and simply put their energies into serving God. On this day at the temple, as Zechariah set out about his task, he did so diligently. As he began to bow towards the Holy of Holies, he was startled to discover that he was not alone, as he was supposed to be. A figure stood before him having the appearance of a man. Fearful, Zechariah had trouble catching his breath. The figure, sisters and brothers, reassured him and told him that he was God's messenger and that his prayer and those of Elizabeth, it had been heard. His wife would conceive a son, a very special child. She would no longer have to feel disgrace of not being able to have a child. If the angel thought that his words were going to make Zechariah feel better, then we should guess again. The angel's message did not feel like good news. It was too unbelievable. Elizabeth was too old to bear a child. Zechariah believed in the awesomeness of God and all that, but really a baby at this age, ain't nobody got time for that. I would have said the same thing. Jesus, you must be joking, not today. But suddenly his time in the holy place didn't seem so wonderful. All he wanted to do was to go home and to talk to his wife about what just occurred. She would help him sort it all out, as most wives do. Amen? Amen. That was for the wives to say, not the men. But amen, wives? Amen. Obviously, the figure spins the fairy tale a little further, describing the son that Zechariah and Elizabeth would have. Again, was this good news? It sounded as if the child would be very weird and would grow into an even weirder man. A man who, if the presence before him was believable, would prepare people for the coming of the Messiah. The audience cannot be surprised at Zechariah's response to the supernatural figure. Even though Zechariah had prayed for this to happen, he felt it was too impossible to be happening to him now, at this stage of his life. Because of his unbelief, Zechariah would be speechless and would not be able to speak a word until after Elizabeth gave birth to their son, when he would speak his name for the first time. Sisters and brothers, as he exited the temple, he began to wonder, what on earth is God up to? Have you guys ever thought about that? I have several times, even this text writing this sermon. In spite of Zechariah's doubt, as he began to hear the first scene of the original Christmas story, in spite of the fact that we all are left to wonder why it took God so long to answer his and Elizabeth's prayers, we have the sense that God is doing something out of the ordinary, something breathtaking for the couple, that through them offering the world the most spectacular gift that could ever be offered. As the first scene of the original Christmas story comes to an end, does it feel as if Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year? Zechariah is left with questions and doubts. They are the kinds of questions and doubts that we all have at Christmas time. As we begin to look around our tables this year at Christmas and we see the empty chairs of loved ones that once sat at the table, as we watch loved ones battle with cancer or AIDS or other life-threatening illnesses, as a depression and fear and loneliness begins to set in, sisters and brothers, we all pull and tug on addictions. They are the kinds of questions and doubts we have. As we go to work every day only to come up short each month on our rent or on our mortgage. As people are let go from their jobs because of the economy. As we hear about devastation and hurricanes and earthquakes and other type of things that are taking place in this world that are destroying people's livelihood. As we hear about disease outbreaks in this country and other countries around the world. As we hear about these increasing amounts of terrorist plots in our cities around our nation and other places, and the numbers of murders that are taking place in our cities because of the skin color of a person, or because I don't like the way you put on your signal at the stoplight. We have our own questions and doubts about the one sent into the world to bring us peace and light and love to all people and nations. Sisters and brothers, this is the irrelevant season of our life, some might say. It is this type of season, sisters and brothers, some might say that there's no good news about anything of Christmas. God has taken everything that was good away from me. Why must I come to church to celebrate this Christ child that comes? Some might say. But here's the good news of Christmas, sisters and brothers. The good news that is in the midst of chaos and tragedy, and the heartbreak and shortcomings and frustrations, and the resentments and the impossibilities and the misunderstandings and the illnesses and the ugliness and death and the hate and fear, God is offering new possibilities to us and to the world through a love that promises and that promises us that he will always be with us until the end of time. A love that cannot be taken away. Granny used to say that this joy I have, the world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away. A love that is made known to us in a manger in Bethlehem over 2,000 years ago. Say amen, somebody. Amen. There, sisters and brothers, lies to us a little rational about this love. It is simple, a love that employs a butterfly effect, as this happens little by little in ways unknown to us. The places in our hearts which have been hardened by situations and circumstances that resist Christmas begin to have a softer feel. Because we begin to say, this is the most wonderful time of year. And the spirit of Christmas within our hearts reveals new possibilities as we begin to see the reason for the hope we have. In spite of circumstances, we are able to celebrate the wonder of Christmas and pass along the goodwill that inspires so many people. That inspires little kids to wake up on Christmas Day so happy to see what's under the Christmas tree. Sisters and brothers, a woman who, along with her 2 small children, went to live with her parents while her husband was at war in Iraq. It was Christmas time, and her mothers and grandparents were busy decorating the tree and buying all the gifts. The excitement and the beauty of the season seemed to push aside the sorrow of what was taking place in the war. A week before Christmas, the news arrived that her husband had been killed in action. The wife began to held up in her room. She began to just cry and wanted to be left alone. Tears and grief and despair and questions and doubt. Her parents quietly decided to take down the festive decorations, the tree, since sorrow had replaced their joy. And Christmas celebrations seemed to have little place in their home this Christmas. Sometime after that, her young daughter came out from the bedroom where she was summoned to once the news came. She came down the steps and she began to ask her grandparents, "Why are we taking down the Christmas tree?" They told her that it seemed out of place when the family received such heartbreaking news. After a moment, she replied, "Please bring it back in. Christmas was made for such a time as this." On the first Christmas, God came into the world in the flesh to connect the creation made for us intimately, to express personalities of sorrow, of questions, of doubt, and loneliness and despair. On the first Christmas, God came into the world in flesh to share the good news, sisters and brothers, that in the midst of all these circumstances and situations, love, everlasting love still exists. My young cousin that came down the stairs is 7 years old now. And she knows what the real meaning of Christmas is. Her grandparents were my Uncle Joe and my Aunt Ramonda. They didn't know what else to tell her but to take down the tree. But she understood that Christmas was more about what was taking place, but Christmas was about love. It is the most wonderful time of the year. My great-grandmother Carrie taught me a song. It was a very special song. And the song we used to sing every single Sunday. I got sick of it. But it was a special song that talked about the light that we have at Christmas. And I'm going to sing it for you this morning, if that's all right. It goes like this. Walk in the light, beautiful light. Come where the dewdrops of mercy shine. Telling me that this is the most wonderful time of the year. My first Christmas in 27 years, I won't spend with her for Advent. I won't light the Christ candle with her this year in my home church. I won't celebrate with her. I don't care what has happened or what circumstances we are in as a church. Put yourself aside and know that this is about Jesus. Know that this is about love. And know that when a loved one is gone and you can no longer see them again, it is the most wonderful time of the year because we'll see them on the other side. So keep wondering, keep believing, but keep walking in the light.